Hi, my name is Rick Noel. I'm a retired software engineer who's written a program called Artemis, which is an application that runs on your computer that helps you find photos really quickly. And this is the sixth of a multi-part series on Artemis and its functionality. In this session, we're going to focus on the various editing commands that can be performed on photographs, mainly about changing some of the attributes in a photograph, like the date it was taken, or the location, or tags, and so forth. So we're going to go over all that in a live demo. So I'm going to share my screen so you'll be able to see the UI. And for those who have seen some of the previous episodes, this UI should be very familiar by now. Here we have the search bar where I'm going to type in search terms to bring up photos I'm interested in. And below is the results panel where the matching photos are shown. So I'm going to just bring up some arbitrary photographs here. And to access the various edit commands from within Artemis, you can do it in one of two ways. One is you can go to the edit main menu here and see the various editing commands here, or you can bring up the context menu to whatever the selected photograph or photographs are and execute the commands from there. One thing to note is that many of the commands to edit the attributes of a file work on more than one file at a time in a batch mode. So if I select several files and bring up the context menu, you see several are in bold, indicating that they can be executed in a batch mode and therefore run on all the selected photos. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, the open and edit commands, they were covered in a previous session, so I'm going to skip those in this one. Next is the copy command. This copies the photograph file to the clipboard. So if I copy the command here, if I go to, say, Windows Explorer, as I'm running this on Windows, I can go to a temp directory, and if I hit paste, it will paste the photograph that I copied to the clipboard. Next is copy image, and that essentially copies the image itself as opposed to the file to the clipboard. So I can, for example, go to Microsoft Paint in this case and do a paste from the clipboard, and the image data now is pasted into Microsoft Paint to be edited. You might find this paste also useful, or I should say the copy image command useful if you want to get the image data to the clipboard. You might bring up a mail client and construct a mail message, and you'd be able to paste the image data into the mail message to share the photo with someone, for example. Okay, next is the copy GPS coordinates command. So if a photo like this one has a location in it, you can copy the GPS coordinates from that photo to the clipboard, and I'll show later how that will be useful within Artemis. Same thing with copy date taken. That will copy the date that the photo was taken to the clipboard and can be used later on in some editing commands. Next is delete, and that deletes the file permanently from the file system. So when you select that command, I will confirm that action. Rename move. This is a simplified version of a rename command. If you notice some quick spelling issue with the name of the file, you come in here and correct that spelling to rename the file, or you could technically change the directory in which that file resides to move it. This is a very simple one that's used for a quick rename or move. There's a more user-friendly batch rename and move that I'll get to later on. Remove from library, we're going to skip. I'm going to cover that in another segment. So here are some of the primary set commands that work on attributes of a file, the first of which is to set the location. So let's say, for example, we have this file here. Let's pretend that this file was taken in Boston, Massachusetts, for example. I can simply say set location and just type in Boston, Mass will be enough. Case doesn't matter. But as you can see from the prompt, you can give the name of a place. As we are in this case, you can specify GPS coordinates, or you can leave the value blank if you want to clear the location if it was added incorrectly. But in this case, I'll just say Boston, Massachusetts. When I do that, you'll see it picks Boston City Hall, Congress Street in Boston. The reason for that is that when you store a location in a photography file, it wants a GPS coordinate for that location. In other words, a point on the globe. And in this case, I gave it an area, Boston, Massachusetts, which is not a single point. And when you give me an area, what I'll do is I'll find out the bounds of that area you give me, and I'll just calculate the geographical center of that area and assign that location. Okay, continuing on with the set location. I mentioned before that setting you can copy the coordinates to the clipboard to use them later on. And I can do that in this case. Let's say, for example, this photograph was taken in the same location as this photograph here, which is East Foothill Boulevard in Glendale, California. Rather than typing that description in here in the set location dialog, I can select this photograph and say, copy the GPS coordinates from that photograph. Now that I have them on the clipboard, I can set the location here by choosing that photograph, selecting set location, and then just pasting the coordinates into the dialog. And now you see this has the location of East Foothill Boulevard as well. Okay, next is set tags. This one we covered in a previous video where I talked about setting tags in the tags panel here. So we're going to skip that and move on to rating. Now, as you notice in the results panel here, each photograph has a rating control here. Now, this rating control is live. It not only shows you what the current rating is, but you can actually click on this corresponding star to set the rating. So right now, this is a 3-star photograph here. I can set it to say a 1-star photograph by clicking on the first star. And now you see it's changed to 1 star. Now, I may want to set a series of photographs to 1 star. So I can select a bunch of these photographs, but rather than setting them all to 1 star by clicking on the first star, clicking on the first star for each one, I can select them all and say set rating and choose the 1-star rating I want, and then hit OK and get them all at once. Next is copyright, set copyright. And that just prompts for any arbitrary string. Whatever you type in will be stored in the copyright attribute of the photograph. Same thing with set artist. It'll just prompt you for any text, so you can put in the name that you choose here, and it'll get stored in the artist attribute of the photograph. Lastly is, in this section, is the adjust date time taken. Now, this can be useful if, let's say, for example, this photograph here, it was taken January 1st, 2000 at 1:15 in the afternoon. Now, let's say that this photograph was taken in, say, Boston, Massachusetts. I live in Colorado. I'm in Mountain Time, and Boston is 2 hours ahead of me. And let's say when I was in Boston taking the photograph, I forgot to change the time zone in my camera. So technically, the local time when this photograph was taken was actually 2 hours later than it was. So rather than 1:15, it was 3:15 in the afternoon. I can correct for that by selecting the photograph and choosing adjust date time taken. And in the case of adjusting, we leave this first radio button here because we want to adjust the date and time. And we just change the amounts that we want to adjust each of these fields. In this case, I want to add 2 hours. So I'll click the up arrow to set the hours to 2. If you want to subtract a value, you can simply click the down arrow and enter in negative values to adjust the values down. But in this case, we're just going to add 2 hours to adjust the time. And so when we hit OK, instead of 1:15, we now see 3:15. Now, the second use case for the adjust date time taken command is, let's say that you got a film photograph, an old family photograph, for example, and you want to scan it in to get a digitized version. So you do that. Well, the date taken in that digitized version is going to be set to the date and time when you did the scan, which is completely irrelevant as to when the photo was taken. But if you knew when the photo was taken, you can set that date and time by clicking on the digitized image and using adjust date time taken. Only instead of choosing to adjust the date time, we're going to choose set the date time by clicking on this radio button, and that enables 2 other choices here to change the date and time. The first is to do the date and time by specifying a textual value, and if I can either hover over here and get help on the formats that are allowed, or in this case I'll click the help button for a moment so we can take a longer look at this. So when we're setting the date and time and we do it by date time value, you can specify the dates by giving the short abbreviated name of the month, you can give the full month name, and you can give this long format where you give the date and the year, including the year, and the time with AM and PM. You can give a numerical date by giving the month, day, year with the time, as we do in the United States. You can also give the year, month, day format, as is often the case in Europe and other countries. So let's take a look at an example here, typing this in. For example, this file here was taken January 1st. Let's say that just to provide a date that was a little more memorable, or as memorable, let's say that this was taken on April 1st. I can just say April 1st, and let's say it was in the year 1993. And it was taken at, say, 3:45 p.m. So I hit that OK, and now you see it changed to April 1st, 1993 at 3:45 p.m. Now I can also specify the time by choosing these widgets here. And in this case, you use the calendar UI to set the date. Let's say I want to set a similar date, but let's say I want the year to be 1999, for example. Scroll down to 1999. Let's say I'll still pick April 1st. And then I can specify the hour and the minutes of the time by simply clicking on the numerical values. So let's say the photo was taken at 5:40 p.m. And you'll see that when I clicked on those numerical values in the dials, the time value was updated here accordingly. If you wish, you can come into this control and specify those numerically. As you can see from the tooltip here, you can give the 12-hour format with an AM, PM, or you can give 24-hour format. Anyway, after specifying the time and date with the controls, I'll hit OK, and you'll see that the date has changed now to April 1st, 1999 at 5:40 in the afternoon. Okay, and that's the adjust date time taken. Next is a set of show commands that are shorthands for getting at photographs that are related to a selected photograph rather than typing in the criteria in the search bar. So I'm going to just bring up some photos of Arches National Park here. I know these have a location here. So if I select a file that has a location, I can say, show me all the photos that were taken nearby where this was taken. If I select that, you'll see that the first thing it prompts for is a distance, which is going to control how far out beyond where this photo was taken do you want Artemis to extend its search. And in this case, since I'm working in imperial units, it's prompting me for miles. And if I were working in metric units, it would prompt in kilometers. And the units you are working in can be set in the settings dialog. So I'm going to say I'll keep it relatively close, within a mile of that photograph. Now, additionally, you can optionally set another filter on those search results. And include only the photos that were taken between the given dates. So if I enable that checkbox, I can then specify a start and end date for the range to be included in the search. And you'll notice that I've pre-populated the start and end date with the date that this file was taken. So by default, if you turn on the filter, you'll get all the photos that were within this many miles taken on the same day. And if I hit OK, you'll see that these are the photos that were taken within that time, and they were all taken on October 31st, 2016. Now, if I wanted to, I could just leave that out and get all the photos that were taken within a mile of that range and see all those. It's quite a bit more, over 500. So that's adjust the, let's show the ones taken nearby. Actually, bring back my original search here. The next one is to show the photos that were taken after this one. So it will take note of the October 31st, 2016 date there, and it will show all the photos that were taken after this one. I find this useful in that oftentimes I'm doing a workflow where I shoot my photos in RAW format and I make edits to the photos and go on to the next one. And eventually I'm going to stop for the day and I can take note of what photo I was last working on. And then I can come here and select that photo the next day and say, show the ones after this one to give me the rest of the photos that I need to work on. Next is show the photos taken in the same day. Pretty obvious that it'll take the date that that photo, selected photo was taken, and will give you the photos that were all taken in that same day. And similarly, pretty obvious, show the photos in the same folder. I'm in the habit of organizing my photos into subfolders, and so if there's a particular photo I'm interested in, but I want to see the rest of the photos that I had taken on that same trip or that same day, generally speaking, I've put those in the same folder, and by clicking on this command, I can get all the photographs that are in that folder. And that is all of the show commands here. Next is locate on map. Now, as I mentioned before, if you click on a photograph and the photograph has a location, this is when I say before in the video in which I was covering the map panels and all these panels here, if you select a photo that contains a location here, like this one here, the map panel here will show a map indicating where that photo was taken. Now, you might find that this is a fairly small display and you want something larger to work with. If you wish, you can bring up the context menu, choose Locate on Map, and this will bring up a browser and show you the map in this larger context. And so now, if I want, if I zoom out here and see I'm in Arches National Park is where that photo was taken. If I zoom out a little bit further, I can now see some of the towns that were located near where that photo was taken. And if I zoom into one of those towns, like Moab, I can start to see information like where are the places to stay where that photo was taken, or where are the places to eat near where that photo was taken. So you can do that kind of exploration in this view rather than trying to do it in a small map view. Same thing with directions. Let's say you want to get directions to where that photo was taken. I can click on the directions there, and I'm coming, say, from my home to where that photo was taken. There's my home in Evergreen, and there's where the photo was taken in Arches, just north of Moab. So you can do all kinds of exploration, making reservations for hotels and dinner and so forth, and do it in this larger context rather than trying to do it in the map panel in the Artemis UI, which would be a little more challenging. Okay, next is the add album and remove to album. I covered those in the video on albums, so I'm going to skip those and go next to this set of show commands here. And these all work relative to the result set. The first one, let's say I have a bunch of photos that I have brought up, and I want to work on, say, a focus on a subset of those. Maybe I want to work on this set here. Maybe I want to set tags or locations, ratings, etc. And I don't want the rest of these photos cluttering up the result set panel. I can remove the rest by saying, show me the selected photos only, and that just gets rid of the rest, and now I can focus on these. Now, by getting rid of them, it's simply removing them from this instance of the result set. If I come up here and execute my search, again, those photos will come back. So it's just for the lifetime of a single search result. Similarly, just for completeness sake, you can also say remove the selected photos if it turns out it's easier to identify the ones you want to remove as opposed to the ones you want to retain. Okay, next is show raw only photos. Now my workflow generally is I shoot in raw mode and I edit the raw files in my favorite editor and then save them out as JPEGs, TIFFs, PNG files, whatever the output format is. And occasionally I like to do a sanity check to see if there are any raw files for which I don't have a corresponding JPEG or PNG or TIFF file. And that would be a clue to me that I might need to look at that raw file and potentially edit it. So let's say, for example, I want to bring up some photos that I shot last year. And I want to only look at the raw files. And since I shoot Canon, the raw extension is going to be CR2. So all the photos I shot last year that are have the extension CR2, those are all my raw files. So if I bring up that list, you see here I have 184 photos. And so now what I can do is select them all since I want to test all of these. And for all these selected ones, if I select show raw only photos, that's going to show me for all these raw ones to test which ones do I not have a corresponding JPEG or TIFF, whatever. So I've got out of the 184, I have 106 that I just have the raw version of and maybe need to go in and start editing and working on these. Similarly, for completeness sake, I have show not raw only files. So if you select a bunch of raw files, you can test to see, well, which ones do I have a corresponding JPEG or TIFF or whatever. So those are the ones I did edit. Okay, next is accept and reject. And if I bring my results of arches again, let's say, for example, that we've got this photo here and this one here, both of which have a poor exposure. They were shot into the sun, so there's a little bit of glare there. So I may decide that I want to reject these photos. I don't want to see them anymore in any future search results. So to do that, I simply select them, bring up the context menu, and say reject. And it will remove them from this set of results. But now if I come back to the search bar and I re-execute my Arches query, you'll see that those photos of the sign are gone as well. Now, if you decide that you inadvertently included some photos in the rejection set that didn't belong, you can always come to the view menu and select show rejected photos to see all of the photos that were rejected. And then you can, selectively choose which ones you want to accept, and in other words, put back, and just select those and choose accept. And now if we execute our Arches query again, we see that those photos come back. Okay, next is the set of commands having to do essentially with sharing files. You can email photos and zip up photos to share with other people. I'm going to cover sharing photos in another video, so we're going to skip that for today. The next command is show in folder, and that basically just for the photo that you have selected, it will bring up an explorer with that displaying the folder in which that file resides. And lastly is the slideshow command. And in a previous video, I talked about slideshows when we created an album and we ran the slideshow on the contents of that album. Well, you can run the slideshow on any arbitrary set of photos in a result set. You simply select the photos that you're interested in and then bring up the context menu and pick slideshow. And so, And as you can see from the slideshow, as we talked about in that other video on the slideshows, there's a large format here. We have a film strip below of all the photos that are included in the slideshow. We talked about these basic controls in the middle that control navigation in the slideshow. You can move ahead one at a time. You can move back one at a time, skip to the beginning, skip to the end. And this is the pause play icon. And then you can obviously jump around by picking a photograph in the film strip. Now there's some of these additional controls where you can execute some commands from the slideshow. One of the things that can be a little bit difficult is if you have a set of files here and you may want to rate them, you may want to tag people in the photograph, you may want to set the location, and doing that looking at a very small thumbnail can be challenging at times. So this way we can work on the set by going into the slideshow, and now that we're here, we can set those values using these controls, the first of which is the set location. So if I click on this, it's exactly the same UI as we saw in the results set to set the location, but here we can do it after looking at a much bigger version of the photograph, so we know exactly where it was taken. Next is the set tags icon, so that allows you to set the tags in the photograph exactly the same way as we did in the UI for the results set, but you can again do it here in a larger context. Next is the rating control here, and as in the results set view, this is a live control, so it shows you what the current rating is, but you can change the rating by clicking on the corresponding star. Now on the other side are another set of controls that are available. The first one is to remove a photo from the slideshow. For example, what I tend to do is I might grab a bunch of photos that I want to include in a calendar that I give as gifts. So I'll put together a candidate set of photos, but I don't want to narrow down the list of photos looking at the small thumbnail. So instead I'll execute the slideshow. And now I can get a much closer look here at them, a better look. And I can see, for example, this photograph here, not a particularly nice one with the sun glare in it. So I might say, okay, that's not a candidate for my calendar, so I can remove it from the slideshow, and I do that by clicking this minus icon. And that takes it out of the slideshow. It doesn't remove it from, it doesn't delete it from the file system, it doesn't reject it from future result sets, it's just taking it out of the slideshow. But this allows me to narrow down the set of photos that I want for my calendar. And then I can select all these photos at once if I want, and maybe set a tag here indicating these are going to be the photos for my next calendar. Okay, the next icon here is the reject icon. So if this is a photograph I'm looking at, I don't want to see it in any future search results, I can click that icon to reject it. The next is the album with the plus icon, and this will add the photograph to a calendar just the way we did in the results set view. Next is the photo album with the minus sign, so that will remove the photo from an album, similarly to the way we did in the results set view. And finally, there's the trash can, which will delete the photograph from the file system. And at the end here is the help button, which if you click on that will bring up the help dialog that gives you the information about all the different controls in the slideshow and the behaviors. So you can look at that if you forget off the top of your head what all these controls are for. So that is the last of the context menu items here. The only other item that I want to cover is when you're looking at a results set, one of the things that you can do is go to the View menu and choose Find, or use Control F on Windows as the accelerator to search for a value that you see in the results set and jump to that photo and select it. So for example, I might have a an interest in a particular photo that ends in some serial number I'm aware of. Let's say in this case I see a 5082 in the name, so I can look for the text 5082, hit OK, and it has selected this photograph that has the 5082 in the name. So it's going to search on the values and the date taken, the exposure information, the location, so and of course the file name. So if you have a result set that's fairly lengthy, but you have some information as to what might be an attribute of that file and want to find it without having to page through and look manually, you can use the find command and search for it. And that is all that I want to cover on the commands in Artemis that manipulate photo attributes. Hopefully you found this useful and interesting. If you want to learn more about Artemis and its capabilities, you can visit my website specified here. And on that page are the remaining videos in the Artemis series. And thank you for watching.